Good day, everyone. Thank you for having me, Jodi, during this special moment. My name is Dayanne Danier. I am the creative director of a fashion lifestyle brand called Bien Abye. We promote products of Creole excellence. So I say Creole excellence because the products are made in Haiti by women artisans. And I'm always looking for ways to kind of like promote their original trade or their original craft, but more in a modern, fashionable way.
Hello, Diane. How are you?
I am fabulous. I'm fabulous. I'm not gonna say fabulous, because who's fabulous in this moment, right? I'm gonna
Fabulous.
say,
I'm gonna say I'm fabulous.
oh, good. I've been trying to move to say I'm blessed because I want more blessings
Mhm.
and I want to give energy to the word blessings. So I feel like if I
Nice.
say I'm blessed enough, like the blessings will come.
Good. Oh, I like because you know what the thing is when the universe hears you, the universe will provide.
Good.
Which I've always believed that. Um, so for everyone that's listening, Diane and I have known each other for a very long time because I mean we're a family. We're a
We
family.
are family.
I love like promoting family. I love promoting Haitian sensation. So yay. So it's funny because even I think this is one of the funniest things about family is that
Mhm.
we know each other. We see each other at family events. We see each other all the time. We talk. We are on social media. We make fun of each other. We support each other. But sometimes we just have no idea what we do. So everyone says, Diane, fashion. I don't know what it means. I really don't know what it means. So I'm going to get educated here, which is going to be
Mhm.
fun, but I want to know where you started. So every single time I'm having these conversations with anyone, I'm
Mhm.
learning new things about not only friends and strangers, but family. So what was your path? Where did you start? Because we don't talk about the business or
Mhm.
education first. We talk about the person behind the education and the business. So share with the world, who
Mhm.
is Diane?
Okay, wow, I love that the intimacy, and I'm so happy it's you because I think I could get more comfortable with you versus a complete stranger, who's like trying to find out what Bien Abyé really where it stems from and where it comes from. So, as you know, or as people now know, I'm first generation Haitian American, and I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, Somerville to be specific. And growing up, my parents, my dad in particular, used to say, this one statement all the time. Even when we were so young, I think the first time I remember hearing it was probably like 7, which was, I'm gonna say it in Creole, and then I'll translate it. He would say, "Timoun, make sure nous bien habillés, m'pa bweze moun pale mal sou nou." Okay, so it was like we left the house and we'd hear that statement all the time, which in translation means kids make sure you look good. Bien habillé means well dressed. I don't want people talking bad about you. And so now in the fashion industry, I tell people that I had exposure to a Joan Rivers before Joan Rivers. And so, we grew up in, small Haitian households. 4 siblings, dad and my mom, and typical Catholic schooling. Education was key. Education was number one, and it was all about make sure you get education and then get a job, right? And so, but fashion kind of was like subconsciously embedded in me, to be quite honest with you, with this whole statement, like literally how we look and your appearance was constantly said and ingrained in our heads. That I joke around with my dad now that I say, if you wanted, every Haitian wants a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer, but I don't want to leave that to Haitian. I feel like that's really a universal thing. Every parent wants their child to have like the secure, easy job. And I say to my dad, well, then I guess you should have got me a computer, when I was young versus telling me to, how do you look? How do you look? How do you look?
It's
Um,
it's it's so funny that you say that because obviously like 100% agree because like that's the same household that I grew up in. But my dad was a tailor in Haiti, and so he would make my mother's clothes, and literally it was always we didn't leave the house without the outfit and the bow that matched the outfit, the purse that matched it, and the shoes and the socks. And I don't even know how they found all the accessories that matched the outfit that they made or that they bought. And it was very important in regards of appearance. Don't embarrass us. This is our brand. And I tell people all the time where, I mean, as a marketing person, that is you started branding who you are when you were little.
Yeah.
Start like all of a sudden when someone started saying like, oh, how's your personal brand? You've been doing it since you were little. And especially immigrants, they are on top of that all the time.
Exactly.
Someone had asked my father when my mother and father were going to church, and a gentleman pulled my dad aside and said, I go, wow, your wife comes to church always dressed up with a hat, and she's always like so polished. I go, she must be like, she must cost you a lot. And he goes, mentally, physically, emotionally. She does.
I love it.
The Haitian household. So with all that being said, where you're like literally like the dressing, all like, I mean, it was part of your life, but how did that evolve to not the job, not the education, but how did that make you feel where you're constantly being told this? How does that define who Dayanne is?
It's interesting that you say that because, when you're around family, you're most relaxed, right?
Or stressed out.
That's true too. and I have a cousin who always does her Thanksgiving cousins gathering, and there was probably about a good 15 of us at my godmother's house and having our cousins gathering, and someone came out and said, this was like a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, and they were like, oh yeah, Dayanne's the bougie one in the group. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm the bougie one in the group? And they're like, oh yeah, it's all about how you look. It's like, you're sitting here, you're sizing people up naturally and you don't even think about it. And I'm like,
right, so it drives me crazy. So it's like you're talking about Auntie Mimi. We love Auntie Mimi because she throws the most epic parties. But the bougie thing, bougie has such a negative connotation for some people.
Yeah.
I've seen it as a positive thing. When you're hearing that, are you seeing it as positive or negative? Because I'm seeing it 120% as positive.
I do feel like, I'm fine with it. I accept it, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, as a Black woman, I don't care what people say, especially at this point in time that we're living in, like who we are and how we look, how we appear, how we step up matters. It's fashion to me, the way you look. Unfortunately, we're living in this world that how you look is like the first thing that someone thinks of how they're going to treat you. You know what I mean? And I say that because I remember growing up, and even the same dad, okay, not like I have two, but when the Haitian in him, when they used to do parent-teacher meetings, he would go in a suit to school and have a parent-teacher meeting. That people literally was like, is your dad a part of like the Haitian mafia? I almost died laughing because I was like, there's no such thing called the Haitian mafia.
Sounds cool, but doesn't exist.
No, exactly. So I'm fine with it now at this stage in my life. And back then I was like, what do you mean? But still I was fine with it because I became known as like, the fashion person, the one who always had it put together, and in some essence, I get the question all the time, when did you know you wanted to be a fashion designer? And in reality, it really was at 9 years old when I was like, because I started hearing all about how you look, make sure you're Bien Abyé. And there were sewing machines all over my house, between my grandmother, between my mother. I think there was like at least 3 sewing machines in the house. My grandmother used to embroider. So it was like every ounce of fashion was kind of like in the house, and it was in everyone's house really, because that was the times, right? But it was really embedded that I was like, I want to be, when someone said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was like, I love art. I want to be a fashion designer. I want to see it. It's all about, drawing little dresses or whatever it may be, So I really was a focused individual that when people sit there and say that to me, it's like, it just shows how much I'm still, until this day, a focused individual.
So when did you decide to switch to, now you're like, it's been part of your life. You clearly see that you have a passion for it. When did you decide, now this is what I'm going to do? And where did you go? And how was that experience in school?
So I was known as the class artist. And you know, I can actually sit here and say that growing up from grammar school and high school, one of my biggest role models was Oprah. And it's because when I sit here and I think about when I was growing up, my gauge for level of success, like grand success, at that time, the only Black woman who was viewed as grand success was Oprah. So I kept thinking to myself, like, what am I going to do that I'm going to be Oprah and beyond? Okay. Um, and so when it came, I was known as the class artist. When it came to deciding what college to go to, I went to Massachusetts College of Art and Design. And when it came to deciding, I remember like I had to have a kumbaya moment with my dad. Okay, because I was like, I'm gonna be a fashion designer. And he was like, no, you're not. You know, because it's one thing to be the class artist, it's another thing to kind of be like, okay, well, this is gonna be my full-time life career. You know what I mean? He was like, this is not gonna work. You know, he's like, no, you're gonna be an engineer. And I was like, no, I'm not, because I was a very studious individual that like I was the president of my senior class, the president of National Honor Society. The last thing that they thought they were gonna hear was me say, okay, well, all this a student, and I'm gonna now go play with, you know, chalk and art and paint and color, you know. Um, and I remember having a sit down and say to him, you know, when you decided to come to this country, I'm sure your mother didn't want you to go, but you had to go in order to learn, you know, grow and live. And so she had to accept that. And I was like, so me being a fashion designer, you kind of have to accept that. And he did eventually. I mean, it was like quite a joke, but you know, when I look back and laugh now, but he did. And so, you know, I had a predecessor where my brother went to Massachusetts College of Art and Design for graphic design. So it was a great transition, right? I could say I'm like, you know, we're legacy kids, even though we're only 3 years apart. But I went there and I got accepted. And right away I knew, you know, Massachusetts College of Art and Design has so many different majors, but right away I knew it was going to be fashion. Of course, I can actually sit here and say mass art was not my first choice. You know, like I wanted to come to New York. Like the idea, it's quite interesting that I'm here now because it was the goal was always to be a fashion designer and live in New York. And so I remember applying to like Parsons and FIT, but I didn't get in, which, hey, whatever. And I'm at a different place now. And I ended up at Mass Art, which was great because it really like nurtured the artist in me first before nurturing like the designer, the seamstress in me. You know what I mean? That I kind of now chuckle whenever someone, if I say to people that, oh, I'm a fashion designer, and they're like, oh, well, my mother sews too. And I'm like, oh, great, then maybe she can work for me. Because you know everyone always like assumes like fashion and then sewing, and I'm like, there's so much more to it. It's still an art form, you know. So yeah.
So that
Was that major shade?
Yeah, yeah, I like that, and I'm like still capturing my little breath from that moment of like time of that comment. Like I love it. When that you're in school, you're learning all these different the nuance of when you're thinking about fashion, when you're thinking about art. There's so many different levels of it. You go to school. Why? And I shouldn't say why. I want to say that I can assume you went the Creole way, but why did you want to bring such attention to the Haitian artistry and working with the artisans?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking me because I have quite an intense background that not a lot of people, some people know because a lot of them, those people are still in my network, my old colleagues, but not too many people know that. Like, of course, I still went the original Haitian parent way, which was you graduate and then you need to get a job. So I've worked for a lot of great fashion companies, some of the biggest in the industry. So I worked for Harry Ellis. And I've worked for Philip Van Heusen, which is AKA PVH. And ironically, I was a menswear designer and I didn't want to do men's actually, but it was like, where do you get a job? You know, being the Haitian mentality, like graduate and get a job. So where do you get a job? So each path had always led me to doing menswear, which was great, you know, and working for these big, stable Fortune 500 companies. So I really learned the business from a grand scale and from a small scale. And then eventually, actually 10 years ago, roughly this time, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of making millions for someone else. I want to try making millions for myself.
Well, before you step there, you mentioned Perry Ellis, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I stepped on your word, so
I'm
I
sorry.
wanted to make sure everyone else heard it. How was it working for? I mean, you're working in all men,
Mm-hmm.
most likely with all men,
Mm-hmm.
and you are first generation. You are a woman. You are a minority. How was that for you in the fashion industry? And at this time, you're in New York. Are you already in New York? Or are you working from Boston?
Actually, it's interesting. A nice little trail of a nice little path of where I am now. Like, so once I got out of college, I actually worked for a small company in Massachusetts called Blower Manufacturing, and they do all law enforcement uniforms. So I don't look at police the same way. In essence, every single time I look at police, I'm like, I know you and I can size you up because I know what you're wearing from your jacket to your pants to your, every aspect. And it was great because they still made product in United States, and they had 5 factories in United States. So I was dealing with a factory manager, and I was more involved with the technical side of it. So they couldn't work unless I sent them markers or whatever, made sure that they had all their material. But that wasn't glamorous, and that's not what I wanted to do. But it was good. It was a good foundation. And so at one point, it was actually around the same year of September 11th. I was like, I want to leave Massachusetts. I want to go to New York. But then September 11th took place, and it was like New York was on a hiring freeze. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, well, then where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? And ironically, an opportunity came up at Perry Ellis, but in their Miami office. So ironically, I picked up and said, hey, why not? Let's give it a try. I was still so young. So I moved to Miami, and underneath Perry Ellis, and it wasn't necessarily a predominantly men's company. I actually found it quite interesting because even though most of the brands were, it's called Perry Ellis, it was actually Perry Ellis International. So they have a portfolio of brands underneath them. And even though most of their portfolio of brands were menswear, a lot of the designers were actually women. But moving to Miami was a very Latin experience. Okay. So that was almost like, I can almost say a culture shock, you know what I mean? Even though, and it was a culture shock from 2 perspectives. If it wasn't Latin, there was still a very Haitian population in Miami. Um, Whereas coming from Somerville, Massachusetts, or even the area of Boston, not to say, but Boston is it is what it is. It's a very segregated town or large city. So to go to Miami, that aspect was a little bit of a culture shock, where it was like, oh my God, am I still in United States? You hear a lot of the Latin. So it was a good culture shock, though. You know what I mean? Not a bad thing. Where the brand I worked for was called Cuba Verin, and so it was a Latin brand. Like, I really did step into Latin America, which, by the way, some Haitians don't realize Haitians are Latin. So it was an easy transition for me. And then from there, after being there for a couple of years, I felt so far and removed from my family that I was like, okay, it's time to finally seek out that path in New York. And I decided to move up to New York. And at that time, that's when I got the job at Philip Van Heusen, aka PVH, another large fashion company that has a whole bunch of portfolios underneath their brand. And I worked for PVH, and again fell into menswear. And that was a huge, this PVH is a huge company, so they have a lot of men, they have a lot of women, but the one thing that you don't find a lot in fashion is you don't find a lot of Black women. You don't find a lot of Black, and you don't find a lot of Black women in fashion. So that was, I'm not going to say it was a culture shock for me, because coming from Somerville, Massachusetts, I'm used to being one of few. So, in a way, it was like I was just living life.
So why was that a thought in your mind? I mean, like you're now in New York. You're at this very very large fashion house. Um,
Mhm.
what was that point where, okay, enough is enough? I kind of want to do my own thing, or was there someone that was inside the company that mentored you and said, like, there's so much more to you. Why are you here? So which
I'm
one?
so happy you say that. Ooh. Well, the last, I could say, 4 years of my time at PVH, I was ready to grow, but I wasn't seeing growth. And my designs were giving them growth financially. And, we were at a turning point in the fashion industry where, everything was being made overseas.
Yeah.
China was actually being viewed as being too expensive. That from an artistic standpoint, I was getting that pressure from divisional presidents where it was like, we want you to design better, but you've got to design, you can't afford it either, you got to design cheaper as well,
Yep.
so that you always have to design better but think profit margin. And it really got to a point where I was like, okay, where am I going here? I've been in the same position for 4 years. Every
Yep.
time I talk about growth and talk about promotion, um, the opportunities are not there, to be
Mhm.
quite honest with you. And you're asking me to give more, give better designs at a cheaper price point. And I was like, okay, this, I had a come to Jesus moment or a come to me moment. And then I was like,
Yeah.
this is not what I entered into the industry for.
Mm.
So ironically, I wasn't pushed out. I wasn't asked to leave. I just said, I'm done. And I left.
Well,
Um,
now, mind you, you said you're done. You have a good job. Your family is now, they have the buy-in of, hi, where you finally convinced us. I always say it takes, because people are like, I go, you had the strictest parents in the world. How did you get away with what you're doing? I'm like, you can always raise good parents, but it takes time. So
yeah.
so you did. You finally raised the good parents. They see what you're doing. They're like, okay, she's doing this. They're able to verbalize to the relatives and friends what she does, and then you quit. How did that go?
Jodi, I swear, you must be like, I'm going to call you my elf on a shelf, okay? Because everything you're saying is 100% right. Everything. Because from me sending guayabes to my dad, like when I was in Miami, and he'd be able to go to like some event and like he'll go to a barbecue wearing a guayabera and he'd be like, Dayanne sent this. She made it. She designed it, and then, it turned from guayaberas to sending him polo shirts, like the guys in my life were living large, okay? And then I decided to make this decision, and I think it was like a week after, or maybe even a month after, I literally sat down my parents, from my dad, my godmother Mimi, and my stepmother, and I was like, guys, I just want to let you know, I quit my job. I remember my dad's look because, at the end of the day, it's all about graduate and find a good job. And to Haitians, like, fashion designer is not really a career to them. When they think fashion designer, they think seamstress and tailor. You know what I mean? And so they were like, okay, is that going to be a stable enough career? So well, here I am. I finally have this stable career. I'm making jokes and bets with my dad about gaining weight, losing weight, going to the gym. And I'm like, oh, I'll bet you $1,000, And he's like, oh, okay, you can play with that. And then I turn around and I'm like, I decided to quit my job and I'm going to start my own business. And, I didn't tell them both at the same time. I just said, I'm quitting my job. And he was just kind of like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't have any kids. I don't have a mortgage. And I don't have, what was the other one? And I don't have maybe it might have been a car. I can't remember what the third stimulation was. But basically, I was saying, I don't have any major responsibility. It's me. I can do this now. And I said, if I don't try it now, then I'm never going to try it. I really did feel that way. I was like in the beginning of my 30s. It was really at the cusp of me as a person. Would I have started? I don't know if I would have started late in 40s. I'm not late in my 40s yet, but if I would have started it 5 years from now, no. And it was all ironic. It like, I like to say that all the energies all start to happen together at the same time, because I remember I left PVH the same year of the earthquake in Haiti. And the July prior to the earthquake in Haiti, so that was July 2009, I visited Haiti for the first time in 25 years. And, one of the things I've always felt as an individual, not even just as an artist, and again, my parents installed this in me, is that I always wanted to like give back. So there was always this plan in my head of, I want to give back, because my parents they were like a centerpiece of the community in Somerville. So giving back, I grew up with. And I'll never forget the time I went home for Thanksgiving, I think it was, and Oprah did Christmas in Africa with Mandela. Do you remember that? I think that, I don't know if that was 2007 or 2008.
I honestly, I don't remember, but I do remember when that happened.
Well, I watched it and was in tears. And I remember watching that thinking, I want to do that for kids in Haiti. And I chuckled because I was like, well, I don't have Oprah money to like fly over a whole staff of people and have a whole big like Christmas and, whatever, but I'm going to start. And so Haiti was always, it's in my blood, it's in my culture, it's who I am. But that whole idea of giving back was always in the back of my mind. Where it was going to cross in the map, I didn't know. So in 2008, I always felt like, well, you can't give to something you don't know, since so many Haitians of my generation have done a hiatus because our parents like didn't really go back with us. I said, all right, you need to go. And so in 2009, I went and I fell in love with this culture that I've had, but now I get to see it again at, firsthand. And then the earthquake took place. And March, I was actually still at PVH, but March of 2010, PVH, I went to Haiti to help out with the earthquake, and PVH supported it. So it was like little by little, things just kept kind of building with this whole Haiti connection, Haiti connection, Haiti connection. I remember being at PVH and talking to my sourcing, the gentleman who was in charge of global sourcing for my product. And I said to him, what do you think about having some product made in Haiti? And he was like, no, I don't think they're ready yet. And then months later, he had like VPs who were reaching out to him and saying, okay, we're going to start looking at Haiti. So the whole idea of having the product made in Haiti was really, again, seeds being planted, or stems growing from a mustard seed from years ago.
How are you being perceived? One of the things that I notice so often where we have relatives that would never ever go to Haiti. Like they were born and raised in America. They would never go to Haiti. They're the first ones to talk smack about like, oh, I would never go. I would never go. Oh my God, it's so dangerous. And then there's us. We go. I mean, like, if given the opportunity, I'm on a plane and I'm gonna go because it makes me feel I'm at home. I mean, I feel very, very comfortable being in Haiti with no problem whatsoever. I speak French. I don't speak Creole. And I still could. I'm fine. I'm good to go. But what I do see is that there are a lot of Haitians that are bothered at Haitian Americans or Haitians first generations coming back and trying to do business because they don't see us as their own, because you left, you never came back, you're not taking care of us. We're going to take resources from everyone else where you want us to work. And again, small percentage, but still a small percentage that we see. And it is frustrating where we're here because we believe in our country and we want to bring more resources to provide more jobs, etc. You hadn't been there for 25 years. Now you're coming in with a whole entire concept of starting a business and mind you, to support. How were you perceived at that time?
Well, I can actually say I was fortunate. I am fortunate, not was, because I still find this, fortitude, but I was fortunate enough to come across great partners. And one of the reasons why I came across those great partners is because starting the business side, like I can now sit here and say I've been in Haiti for 10 years, right? And the business side has come the last 5 years. My first 5 years of Haiti was actually going in as a fashion designer. So everyone was like, oh, the fashion designer from New York. Yeah. But it was because I have actually a nonprofit that deals with kids. And when people were hearing that, they were like, okay, she wants to help the less fortunate of the society, so why not help her? So it's like I built great partners that way. And every single time I was going down, I'd always have people say to me, okay, well, you're the fashion designer, I want to show you this and I want to show you that. You're the fashion designer, I want to introduce you to this person, I want to introduce you to that person. But like I knew fashion from a grand scale, I knew it from a corporate scale. I mean, I am someone who I've had my product, my designs, not Bien Abyé, but working for PVH and Perry Ellis, I've had my designs made in 10 different countries, maybe. Like you name the country, I've probably, had some correspondent, from Peru, from Korea to Vietnam to Bangladesh to Pakistan to Kenya to Egypt to China to India, you know, everywhere the Far East that PVH was creating and Perry Ellis was creating, I was creating. Oh, in Mexico and El Salvador, because Blower as well. So it's like, you know, my map is quite grand in that respect. And so people would come in and kind of like, you know, say, well, what about fashion from this side of standpoint? And eventually in 2015, I actually had someone ask me to come in with my expertise and work with artisans and train them. And you know, I was like, okay. So I worked with a group of, that was the first time I worked with a group of women artisans, because when I started my brand Bien Abye, it started off being as Made in America. And Made in America sounds good, but Made in America comes at a certain price point. That's the part that people don't realize, is like, as much as you want to create that Made in America job, but that means, you know, a blouse that is out of, you know, any of these foreign countries that could easily be a $50 blouse, but in United States is a $300 blouse, you know what I mean? If not even more sometimes. And so I said to myself, okay, I need to start looking at other areas. And if it's going to be underneath my control, I want to make an impact. So I want it to be Haiti. And a lot of people saying to me, your standard is not here, is what the term I was getting. And I was like, what do you mean it can't be there? And they were like, yeah, that's too much, because a lot of what Haiti has going on in the fashion or in the textile industry is from mass manufacturing and the whole, you know, factory setup, you know, t-shirts. It was a lot of simpler product than my designs. But then when someone introduced me in 2015 and asked me to come down and train these artisans, it was like my eyes opened up. And I remember leaving them, and they were probably like, they loved me as much as I loved them, but I remember leaving them in tears because I couldn't believe at how, you know, hardworking they were, I hate that word resilient, but how open to learning they were. You know, all they kept saying to me is, well, Madame Danier, whatever you want, we'll do, we'll try. What, Madame Danier, anything what you want, we'll do, we'll try. And that's when I realized the possibilities are here. I just need to think outside the box, so to speak.
I'm going to rewind a little bit here in regards of the partnerships. There's so many businesses that are listening, watching right now, and they're not understanding the importance of partnership. Can you give me like one, how did you form, like when you first walked in, how did you form those partnerships, and how important is it for any business to form those partnerships to make sure that their products, services, or business grow?
Oh my God. Very important, number one, because I mean, I could actually sit here and say what we've been in a time period where travel has kind of stopped for the last 9 months. Or are we at 10 months? I've lost time, to be quite honest. The travel has stopped. And I haven't traveled to Haiti in a year and a quarter, I guess I could say. The last trip that I could move around was April 2019. And since then, but I'm still working in Haiti on a daily basis. The first phone call I have every single morning is with Haiti. And it's because of the strong partnerships that I grew, you know, that they trust me, I trust them. And at the end of the day, it's almost like building these bridges. You know, life is really all about building strong bridges. And once you build that strong partnership, then the sky's the limit. It's all endless, you know. And I can actually say I've built a web of partners in Haiti that, you know, I have my core people that I could always call and trust, you know, that I'm like, whether it's that in essence, even especially now virtually, I'm in New York, but I'm in Haiti. Like I've had some people say to me, where are you now? When they like, are you in DC, Boston, Haiti, New York? You know, the fact that I could say Haiti in that realm of American states, it tells you how strong my partnerships are. I mean, even just recently with COVID, actually, I was really kind of surprised. My nonprofit was doing an outreach in regards to masks on the ground in Haiti. And we just sent an email letting people know we're doing outreach. And one of my partners in Haiti actually called me and said, hey, Dee, I can give you some masks if you want to give it out to some of the students because I just made 10,000. So, you know, and that was a partnership. And I was so surprised. Like, it wasn't like I seeked it out. They came to me and said to it. So that just tells you, you know, years of partnership. And, you know, eventually partners become not even just relations, but to me, they're extended family, right? When they're partnerships that last a long time.
Absolutely. Um, March happens where the ripple of like the conversations start going. You are here. You haven't been in Haiti for a while, but you're running your business. The fashion world starts talking. The pandemic starts in the spring and throughout, and many months, the summer months going into the winter months. What was that like for you? What was that like for your artisans? And what has that done to the business?
Ooh, that's a really good question. For me, it was like initially, and still a little bit even now, I can say I was somewhat okay and somewhat in the mind frame of okay because I work from home already, right? So being having to stay indoors wasn't so much of a challenge for me. The aspect of that was probably a challenge is that even though I was working from home, I would go in to see my vendors probably like 2, 3 times a week. Whereas now it's like, I can't tell you the last time went into the city and I'm working within an 8 block radius. It's between the only things that I leave the house for is for the post office and the grocery store. But fashion wise or retail wise, that completely cut because people completely changed what it was and what it is that they shop and buy, right? So I remember March, like literally I was sitting here debating on canceling an event. I just launched a whole product line of product from Haiti. It was I did a wine tasting event where I was showing like the home decor. It was like an entertainment style event where I was showing the home decor, but at the same time, I had all the product exposed. So I had the accessories exposed, I had the menswear exposed, all with the mind frames of getting orders and keeping these people working. And this was literally on like March 13th, and I think New York closed down March 16th. Okay, so that just tells you it's like complete chop. Um, and right away, the first thing that came up was everyone is sitting here making masks. And I was just like, okay, I'm not making masks. I'm not making masks, because I took it serious. The blower side of me kind of came out and I was like, oh my God, protective clothing, masks shouldn't be taken as a joke. It really needs to be protective. It needs to be made out of the right material, da 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 da. And I wasn't going to sit down and be that seamstress who was like sewing up a storm, like the Susie Homemaker, which no disrespect. I think it's great. They saved a lot of lives, but it just wasn't me. I'm a designer. And then, eventually I shifted because the calls started coming from my clients. My clients were like, well, are you making masks? And one of the things that Bien Abyé makes is we have a whole line of silk scarves that stemmed from our ready-to-wear collection. And they're not just silk scarves, but they're silk printed scarves. And so my clients started asking me like, well, are you going to take those prints and make the mask out of that? And so that's when I started looking into it. And that's really what kept the expansion of the business, that it was like, okay, let me look into making the silk mask and really making mask wearing something fashionable versus something that is like a necessity just to live, which was great. Go ahead.
I love that you said that because I was like, that's like where I was going to go into. Like the pandemic happened. How did you pivot? And also, what did you add to your company that you would have never thought about? The mask is one, but in regards to you, obviously you want to keep the artisans working. What did you add to your company or do to your company for yourself and for your team that you probably would have done eventually, or you just like, this is something new. I'm going to add it to my company, and I never thought I would have even considered it.
Literally the mask. I'd have to say it was the mask. And the one good thing is like, because of who I am as a person, I'm a philanthropist and I'm a fashion designer. Then when the need for masks first came up, I was able to pivot with the philanthropy side where we got donations and we made the women make masks. Okay, so mask in Haiti for distribution in Haiti, and we made between 6 to 8 thousand masks. I want to say.
That's insane.
And so it kept them busy for a long period of time, and at the same time I'm slowly getting this rise in inquiry about silk mask, right? And I'm like, no, 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 I'm not going to do mask. And it really, I can actually say I would have never thought to do mask. I would have never really thought that I would have gotten to this point where I would have been looking at making masks, but it was a good pivot. And it's been proving to be a good pivot, because what has happened is that some people will start off buying masks and then they see everything else and they're like, oh, can I have this as well? You know what I mean? So the accessories has been selling as well.
What would you say to anybody that is listening to you? Here's your path, especially, oh my God, most young girls want to be in the fashion world, and you're in it, and you were at the big, like, I mean, big companies, and you leave to create your own. What would you say to anyone that is thinking about either starting their own business in the fashion world or anywhere, as in starting their own thing, or individuals that are looking to leave the job that they've been in, and they're like, you know what, it's time for me to leave. And now that I'm working from home, I can do that research, but I'm scared. So what would you do? Because again, you chose this different route. You finally get into this big behemoth of these companies that anyone would ever wish to go for. You're doing extremely well, and then you leave. What would you give? What advice would you give to anyone that's looking to do this right now? And how do they start?
You know, it's interesting you asked that question, because the industry has shifted so much as far as fashion is concerned. When I started, I remember the mind frame was, if you have a side hustle, don't tell your boss. Don't tell your company, because they'll get rid of you and you might need that, whatever. Versus now, fashion has become so sensationalized that it's come out that anyone can do fashion, you know what I mean? And so for that reason, between fashion and what, not even just fashion, everything, like businesses now do not turn a blind eye when they hear that their employees have hate to say, but a side hustle or a side interest, to make it sound nice, right? Some businesses actually embrace you for that. I've watched people actually get hired for a full-time job because of the job they already are doing. That's their passion job.
Yep.
So what I would say to people is, number one, as sensational as it looks, have a path and have a plan. I think too often, generally, the marketing side of fashion and the marketing side of starting your own business makes it seem like these people just started today and tomorrow they became famous. I don't know anyone who's gone through that. In reality, it's taken a lot of time. The luck that people think that individuals are having are far from luck. They've actually been at it for years, sometimes decades.
Yep.
They're just not telling people. So I would say have a plan, and be open. And when it comes to fashion, like, because so often now people are not in like a design, they don't go to design school, they know nothing about art, something as basic as, they don't know anything about fabric, and then they're like, well, I want to be a designer. And that's all fine and dandy, but just know that if you don't have your design basics, it's going to be a challenge. So, get the basics and have a map.
The good thing about the basics that I think that people take for granted is that you can go anywhere and find resources. If you cannot afford to go to that fashion school, or you don't get into that fashion school, you can find other ways to learn textiles and fashion and things like that. So I think that people take that for granted, where I have to be only at this place to succeed, and not realizing there's so many different ways to succeed. And as well as like finding a mentor like you and asking questions, like the women in Haiti, they're asking you and they're like looking for your guidance because you have that expertise that they can learn from.
Yes. I mean, I sit here and I'll say I'm a snob about my education. Whereas I'm like, look, that bachelor's in fine arts, like there's so many times when I can see a brand that the designer evidently didn't have something as simple as color basics. And sometimes people think, the combination of colors or mixing of colors is, oh, it's a trendy thing. And I'm like, no, that's not even trending. That's like two colors that are clashing. They're fighting. You know what I mean? There's a way to make a jambalaya, a gumbo, or as I like to call it, a bouillon. There's a way to make a bouillon where it tastes good. And then there's a way that you're like, this is just really bad. And
bouillon, for anyone that's listening, is our soup. It's our beautiful soup. So bouillon, a bad bouillon is a bad bouillon. I mean,
and you've seen it, right? Have you not seen it? Like, you're just like, that's something about that's just not gelling together. And that, and it's quite interesting when they become very famous, because you know, everyone, I think this next generation is always thinking about social media and how can I become famous for the gram, and that's all fine and dandy. I like to call it smoke and mirrors sometimes, but if you don't have that strong foundation, it's the
Longevity will
strong
not happen.
foundation that's keeping people in business, and that's the one thing that I'm seeing a lot now, even with designer brands that we've heard all over in media, but you're wondering, where are they now? And it's like, well, did they have a strong foundation is the question.
Yeah. I have two last questions for you. So, and look, and I know, look, I'm taking so much of your time. So, but I have two last questions. Number one is, where do you see the fashion industry going now? Because everyone's home, everyone's just like focusing on wearing like top items.
Mhm.
Eventually, we're going to go back home. I mean, go back to the workforce or travel, etc. Where do you see the fashion industry going post-pandemic? Number one, and part two, that in regards of more ethnic, more vibrant, more global in regards to the fashion world, instead of like, oh, look, 5 outfits, they all look the same. So where do you see the fashion industry? And once you answer that one, and I know that I'm asking this a big question, but I need a brief answer. And then I have the last one.
Oh, that's the question. Okay, there's
I'm
another
so
there's
sorry.
another
Yes,
one after.
yes,
Okay,
there's one question. Like, where
the
do you see the fashion
fashion.
industry
Well,
going?
it's interesting you say that, because I just said, I keep saying it's interesting, interesting, interesting. But the fashion industry, we've been going through a transition for the last number of years. Okay, and we didn't realize how to get out of this transition or what steps to take, and so COVID just forced us into that. And what were those transitions? Number one, it comes down to, what are people really wearing right now? You know what I mean? Like, it's a major challenge. We're going to see a cleanse of the fashion industry, because a lot of people are either going to be able to pivot, or they're just going to have to close their business, because you know what, people aren't wearing evening gowns right now. And then also there's this transition with technology, and not even just because, how are people shopping? That's another thing. And then also the whole cultural transition, that whole word of cultural appropriation came about the last couple of years, where we're looking at designer brands doing the wrong thing, and we're like, oh my god, that's so racist. All those things are taking in effect right now in fashion, and it's going to be a challenge to see what's going to happen in the future. Are we going to be more open-minded? Are we in a phase? We're hoping that we're going to be more open-minded, but things happen in phases, and they come in, they come out, and we'll have to see. I mean, I sit here and I think about the whole concept of casual Friday, and everyone's like, oh,
Too
it's
casual.
just for now. And I'm like, no, it kind of grew. So casual Friday became casual week, and became, that's just the way people go to work now. You know what I mean? So it ends up getting affected. Like, the sales of suits, the sales of suits for men, suits for women, it's not as much as the sale of a polo, and vice versa. So I know you have one more question, so I want to be able to let you ask that one.
I always like to save the last question, save the best for last, and this is all about you. So, if you were going to ask of anyone that's listening to you right now, if you had an ask, a professional ask and a personal ask of anyone that's listening, what would you ask them?
A professional ask.
And a personal one. So two.
So okay, a professional and a personal one. Um, I would say professional would probably be. It's interesting because I still feel young. That I would say professional would be mentorship. Um, to kind of like, even with my years of experience, I'm always open to learning, and I have a very strong artistic background and creative background. I would love probably more mentorship in the business aspect of things. Okay. And personal, I would say, the personal side of me is probably my philanthropy, which I didn't really discuss that much. And my philanthropy is a very important side of me as well. Both sides are important, but it's a very important side. So right now, we're looking at fundraising. We're fundraising to build a school. And so the personal side would be finding someone who'd be interested in supporting such efforts, whether it be from best practices in fundraising, or, connecting me to the right people who believe in promoting of education. Those would be the two things. So, yeah.
I love it. You know what? Not only did you not talk about that, which is very important to your heart, but you didn't really dive into like the products. Like, so look, what do we just? I want to get a little bit of I mean, I'm going to show visuals.
Mm-hmm.
What are your product lines, and what are your favorite ones, and how do you want people? Again, who's your best customer?
Wow, that's really hard to say. The essence of Bien Abyé really is encompassing my clients' lifestyles, and it just happens to be that the product is made in Haiti by women artisans. Okay. So too often I think people think that when they think made in Haiti product, they think it's going to be strongly ethnic influenced, and it's gonna, it might be someone who says, well, I'm not Caribbean, I'm not Black, therefore it's not me. And that's not the case with Bien Abyé. Bien Abyé is really about Creole excellence in the sense that we love for people to see the product and say, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I say, oh my God, it's made by Haitian artisans. And everyone's like, no way, So we're really into some of their old crafts, whether it be beading, whether it be, embroidery. And so, I love all the product. It's so hard for me to actually sit here and say, what are my best products? Like, I love our beaded bags, because I love the way the women make the beaded bags, and I'm on the phone with them every single day, all the time, sometimes throughout the whole entire day, talking about the craftsmanship of the beaded bags and how.
Well, it's funny that you say that. I went on your website and I was even surprised. I'm not gonna lie, I was so surprised because again, I know Dayanne, I know like relative Dayanne,
yes,
Dayanne, fool around Dayanne. I didn't know. I like never ever thought about it, and those bags are beautiful.
Thank you.
They are so stunningly beautiful. And I'm like, can't wait to dress up again. I definitely want to go online and buy some because I was unaware. And this is one of the things that I love the most about hearing what you guys are doing and just being aware of even just like all the things that you went through in regards to getting to this point where you're in the fashion world. Like my mother says, Dayanne, she loves fashion. She does fashion. And I'm like, I don't even know what that really means because so I'm blown away, like blown away.
Thank you. So I love being able to do that. And even right now, I'm actually like, I'm not gonna announce it, but I'm working on some projects that are going to require a lot of hand embroidery, or sewing by hand is what I should say, not even just hand embroidery, but there's aspects of it that's sewing by hand, like my headband as we speak. Okay. And so I'm dealing with a different group of artisans in a different area of Haiti. And so, something as simple as this headband, I just love to create product that is great product, and people say, wow, I love this. And then after that, being able to say to them, well, yeah, it was manufactured in Haiti. So it's almost like they have a piece of Haiti that they love, so did I kind of give you the whole aspect of the product line? Like
you did.
Okay.
You did. But you know what, as we're talking, people are like looking at photos as well of the different products. So that's a good thing. I mean, and I know I said it was the last question. No,
that's fine.
No. This is definitely the last one. Can you talk to me about the areas of what areas are you getting your artisans and what part, so people could understand Haiti's a small country, but it has so much. So where are the artisans coming from and what regions quickly?
Okay. So the beaded ones are pretty much in Port-au-Prince, right? And that works so well because then I can easily they ship to me, ship out. It's like that has been going on for the last, oh my God, year and a half, or longer than a year and a half, but I'm saying consistently because I've got places, I've been doing collaborations with stores in South Carolina. I have people buying them individually throughout all of the United States. So they've been pretty much working. And then the embroidery, or the women who work with me in regards to sewing by hand, they're in the central area of Haiti. And it's an area called Hinche. I've never worked there, actually. I don't have any family there. I have no connection.
Can you pronounce the name again?
Hinche.
Ish. Okay.
Yes. And it's an area that I have no connection to. Ironically, these are the women that I trained in 2015. And how I started transitioning to having them making product was because when I saw what they were making in 2015 and people were like, okay, we'll sell our product, it made me start thinking, okay, now you know their specialty, design to their specialty. You know what I mean? So I know that they're great with working by hand. So that's when I actually came out with the tabletop collection for Bien Abyé, which ironically, everyone's staying at home, right? So it's the perfect time. Like now everyone's considering, how does my table look when I eat? And so it came out with napkins, came out with table runners, and they all, it's all created in Haiti. Whereas what some people have done in the past is what they'll do is they'll send already made napkins to Haiti, and then they'll just ask them to embroider. Whereas I'm the designer, so I'm sending fabric to Haiti, have the napkins made in Haiti, have the runner made in Haiti, and then they're embroidering it. And now we're going to be doing, hair accessories as well. So it's a whole bunch of things that I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, this is their specialty, so why not keep allowing them to perfect their own specialty and design around that?
So are those the two areas specifically that you work with, or are there other regions?
For business wise, like those are the two areas in specific that I work in, but I'm in other regions of Haiti for the philanthropy side. Yep. So in essence, I'm like all over Haiti.
I love it. Oh my God, Dayanne, thank you. Thank you so very much for sharing more of you. And I mean, it literally is one of those moments for me that, whether it's your family, well, I tell a lot of my businesses, I'm like, when you have news to share it with friends and family, because family members, you don't know who they are, who they know. And it's just one of those moments where, like, I mean, come on, like, look how old we are.
I know.
And I'm like really learning what you do now. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, absolutely ridiculous. And you are literally the third family member that I've had on the podcast. And each time I'm like, this is a sad state of affairs.
In some essence, I'm a very shy person. You know what I mean? As weird as it is, and not like I want.
Shy. I'm sorry, shy to the world, not shy with us.
So it's hard for me to know like what to share, what not to share, and sometimes it looks a little convoluted because some people might say, "Oh my God, you're all over the place," and I'm like, actually, no, I really just have two focuses: a heart and a soul. Fashion and philanthropy. That's really it, and they just both all center around Haiti.
Oh no, my God! Look at me! Look, I tell people, because people always ask me, they're like, "How are you the way that you are?" And with no qualms and I have no shame of saying this, where both my parents raised me to be conceited. And yes, if you're raised to be conceited, you have to take care, there's parts of you have to take care of yourself, oxygen on you first. And so how can you be humble when you decided to be an entrepreneur and get yourself out there? It's like, you don't have time to be humble. So you have to, in order to help those that you really want to, the people in Haiti, I go, those artisans, I go, you have to put yourself out there. And it's super uncomfortable. Even if you're the most conceited person in the world, super uncomfortable, but we know what we are working hard for others. And I love that you're doing this. I mean, I love that I'm talking to you. I love that I'm learning more from you. And I love that I'm like really trying to find as many ways possible to get your story out. So thank you, my beautiful family member. Thank you.
Thank you, darling. I'm hugging you. Virtual hug.
Virtual hug. Thank you, my love. And I will talk to you offline.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.